Consider a culture more ancient and yet more progressive than our own. Women in Victorian England only gained property rights in 1870 and the right to divorce in 1878. Meanwhile, women in ancient Egypt already possessed these. They would enjoy economic, social, and political rights, whereas now female Egyptians face a whole range of problems, from property inheritance to labor rights. Let's look at Eastern ancient reality together. We begin by exploring the economic, social, and political conditions of women in ancient Egypt. Then we delve into detailed historical examples of women power, and wrap up by discussing the potential that this historical perspective can give us today. A Greek historian Herodotus incredulously stated that in the Egypt of his day, the women did all the trading and marketing while the men sat at home at the loom. Imagine the shock of a Greek man. And we couldn't believe Diodorus Siculus when he stated that Egyptian husbands promised in their marriage contracts to submit themselves in all the things to the power of their wives. Nothing is more common among the masses of ancient Egyptian contracts than to see women buying and selling land and even tendering contracts to the state without the smallest reference to their husbands. In a contract in the Turin Museum from the 2nd century BC, we find a woman named Kimon selling a land for building purposes. In contrast, in classical Athens, women had no legal personhood. They were assumed to be a part of the household and submit to the master of the house. Even the legal term of a wife was known as a damar, a word that is derived from the root meaning of to subdue. Marriage in ancient Egypt was a purely civil contract, and there was no religious aspects to it. It's quite radical to see a marriage at that time just as a social deal between two equal partners, anticipating division of property. Here's an interesting quote from the marriage agreement of the time of Darius. "You have given me for my nuptial gift 11 argentius. If I despise you, if I love any other man, it is I who must pay 19 argentius, as well as the 11 argentius which you have given me." From this we may conclude that the young lady was more renowned for her beauty rather than for her consistency. This official papyrus proves the absolute equality that subsisted between men and women in ancient Egypt. We see contracting parties being on the same footing. As for politics, women could occupy the position of the council of the sovereign, of course owing to her intellect. And more than that, they could actually be those sovereigns, and we are going to see the specific examples of that just in a couple of minutes. What can art tell us about women's status? The earliest sculptured monuments of Egypt show the complete equality of sexes in a very striking manner. The husband and wife were depicted as equal in size. The importance of the woman's equality of size derives from the convention practiced in this culture of presenting lesser beings smaller in size than the main characters. So the fact that these people are equal in size makes us conclude that women and men were equal socially too. Here we observe women actively engaging in trade or craftsmanship, which are good examples of gender equality in terms of access to the labor market. What do you think could cause the presence of such rights for women in Egypt? The realism and practicality of Egyptian society? Well, this might be an interesting thought, but researchers estimate this might derive from religion. An example of why this is believed is because the sky goddess Nut was the mother of stars in ancient Egypt. Nut provided an essential of life, namely the daily rebirth of the sun. So here you see her swallowing the sun, symbolizing the movement of celestial bodies and therefore of time. In the ancient world, however, this function was normally established by male deities such as Marduk of Babylon or of course God in ancient Israel. One of the most important female rulers in Egyptian history is Queen Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut can definitely be named one of the most prolific builders in ancient Egypt. She created her female kingship, constructing extensive temples to celebrate her reign. She initiated large-scale construction projects such as the Karnak Temple complex and most famously the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. At one time, this temple was unique, demonstrating the harmony 1,000 years before the construction of the Parthenon in Athens. A garden of exotic trees and shrubs was laid out in front of the temple itself, which is quite a problem to do in a desert. In addition to that, Hatshepsut has re-established a number of trade networks that had been disrupted. She oversaw the preparations for a mission to the remote land of Pont, having built the first fleet of sea-going ships known in the history of the world. And lastly, recent research has proven that Hatshepsut personally led military operations. In particular, she commanded Egyptian troops in a number of campaigns against rebellious Syrian and Palestinian cities. Next is of course Nefertiti. She played a crucial role in the religious and political life of Egypt. Her husband carried out a religious reform, and Nefertiti's support for this venture was necessary for its successful implementation. Her beautiful body was depicted in monuments which were distributed through the kingdom to embody abundance. None of the religious processions took place without the queen. An unexpected result of the work on the Karnak temple in Egypt is the discovery that Nefertiti was depicted in a substantially greater number of reliefs than her husband. And I actually think it shouldn't come as a surprise because her image is quite widespread in our culture. So for example here, if you've noticed, I've got a talisman with her image, and my mom brought this to me from Egypt when I was like 10 years old, and it's actually been my talisman ever since. Times of women thriving in Egypt came to an end with European rule in the region. Laws concerning women underwent a sweeping reform during the reign of Ptolemy Philopator. Of sale and leases are seen to be executed by the husband and wife conjointly, or by the husband only. In this time of shifting laws, Cleopatra represents the last pharaoh of independent Egypt, the last powerful woman. Only Cleopatra, of course, stands out in her time, leveraging Roman commanders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony to secure resources and support for her country. Cleopatra defied traditional gender roles to Ptolemaic Egypt. Only her intelligence and charisma allowed her to navigate the complex political landscape of the ancient world and assert her authority as the ruler of Egypt. But even this powerful woman couldn't stand up against the upcoming era of absolute Roman world domination. Later still, the woman is altogether effaced, and from the time of the Arab conquest she becomes a secluded slave, which repeated today in the modern Egypt. Polls taken in 2010 show that 54% of Egyptians support sex segregation in the workplace. The literacy rate of women is 65%, which is lower than that of men, which is 82%. Whatever the cause of women's prosperity, this is of a great importance for us to find women free, respected, and in the possession of all the rights men do. As we've seen, the roles and rights of women have shifted dramatically over centuries, from periods of notable equality to times of severe restriction. We wanted this journey not to serve just as a history lesson, but as a beacon of possibility. Together we have the power to reconstruct social norms and rebuild the world where every woman will be able to rise to the full height of her potential, and the richest experience of human history will serve as our inspiration.